Hello students, welcome to the channel of One Stop Law. Here we will try to simplify the basic concepts on certain important topics of law, and we will try to understand them in the most simplest form, which kind of clears all of your doubts. And at the same time we will try to deep dive into the sections, the concerned provisions of the legislations, as well as we will try to look into some of the case laws as per requirement. But basic idea is to simplify the concept, uh, to make you understand it and apply it in your legal career as you go. So today I have chosen for you a very basic topic from the Indian Contract Act, basically your contract law, a subject which you are acquainted with or made acquainted with in your very first sem of in your legal course. And those of you who are studying in class 12 legal studies, this is also a part of your class 11 syllabus. So yes, this is a very basic topic. You have some of the questions from here in your CLAT exam as well, in your legal aptitude part. So consent part of contract law is a very basic as well as very important topic. So under contract law, uh, there are few essential ingredients for a valid contract, we all know. So one of the basic ingredient, one of the main ingredient for a valid contract is of course consent, and that too free consent. So what is consent basically? Consent is like agreeing to someone. Okay, if we know that under the definition of contract, an agreement which is legally enforceable by law is contract, right? So contract has to be an agreement. We have that proverb, or we have that statement, that all contracts are agreements but all agreements are not contracts. So somewhere agreement is always included in a contract. But what do we mean by agreement? Agreement means, first of all, we need at least two parties, and two parties should agree to something. That is where they make an agreement, right? So this agreeing, okay, this agreeing to one another's ideas, thoughts, okay, proposal, acceptance, the term which you are more acquainted in the contract law, it always starts with a proposal and someone accepting it. So when a proposal is accepted unconditionally and absolutely, we say an agreement is formed. That is, the two parties have agreed to it. They don't have any reservations, they don't have any conditions, they have agreed to something in common. So this agreement is basic part of contract, and that is actually the basic idea about consenting. That is, how do you agree? People can be in agreement with others by various ways, but how do you agree? How do you agree to make a contract valid? All right. So for that, one has to consent. Now, what do we mean by consent? The literal meaning of consent is, as you can see, act of assenting to anything or agreeing to anything. Specifically, in this case, it is an offer. Okay. So by the act by which we agree to someone, we kind of assent, give our assent to something. Okay, that is known as consent. Now, the Indian Contract Act does not specifically define the term consent, but Section 13 of the Indian Contract Act provides for the provision on consent. And it is, if we read the basic provision of the section, we see it talks about that two or more persons, when agree upon something in same thing in same sense, they are said to consent. All right. So two or more persons, so definitely you can't, of course we agree to ourselves as well, like we, when we think of something and we are very confident about our thoughts, we say that yes, I vouch on my ideas, I trust my ideas, but that is to yourself. Agreement, you need minimum, we need minimum two parties. Okay, so when two parties agree with each other, we say they kind of uh, have a common consensus on what they want to do. So that consensus is like when two or more persons. Now the most important part is agree upon same thing in the same sense. Now what does it mean, same thing in the same sense? So suppose a child goes to a balloon seller, and the child is asking for a red balloon, and the balloon seller is insisting on the child to have, say, a green balloon. Now the child doesn't want the green balloon, okay, the child only wants that red balloon. So the thing is, the child will not accept from the balloon seller that balloon unless it is given that red balloon, right? So what the balloon seller will do, he wants to sell, he is there to sell a balloon, okay, at least he is getting a buyer, a customer who is eager to buy a balloon from him. So ultimately the balloon seller agrees to give the red balloon to the child. So what happened here, both of them agreed to the balloon, okay, same thing, in the same sense, that is, they agreed on the color. Balloon was fixed, okay, balloon seller was selling balloon, the child went there to buy the balloon, okay, this is the thing. But in the same sense, there was a confusion regarding the color, okay, but they again coincided their thoughts on the same color, that the child wanted the red balloon, and the balloon seller ultimately gave it or her, him, generally we say child or children in universal language, it, so give the child that red balloon, okay. So this means same thing in the same sense. We have a more colloquial term for it, we call it meeting of minds, where both the parties mind meet at a common point. We call it that the parties consent, and this consent is known as consenting to the same thing in the same sense, which I told you, meeting of minds, the both the parties mind meet at a common point. And we also call it, the maxim for it is consensus-ad-idem. Consensus-ad-idem, the term consensus-ad-idem basically means what is written in the second bullet, that is, same thing in the same sense. The parties should not enter into or cannot enter into a contract unless they agree upon the same thing in the same sense. This is all about section 13, which is a very important part of contract. But an essential ingredient, consent as an essential ingredient for a valid contract, is not our section 13 but is section 14. Why? Because section 13 kind of gives us the kind of consent, okay, the definition of consent. Consent is to agree to something in same sense, same thing in the same sense. This is the definition of consent which is given in section 13. But then we need to look into the fact that what is a free consent, because we can agree to anything and everything on ourselves, or we can be made to agree, okay. But contract act is very clear that a contract can be formed only when the parties to it agree to the thing in the same manner voluntarily, that is, on their free will. So voluntariness of the consent is the basic ingredient, one of the essential ingredient of a valid contract, and that is laid down under section 14. So in our next lecture, students, we will learn about the various factors which kind of take away the freeliness, the voluntariness of the consent and makes it not free, consent not free, okay. That section 14 will be discussed in our next class. Thank you, students.